for couples had just settled into their assigned booths and leaned back in their chairs, savoring their first drinks of the evening. It was an intriguing mix of age groups. Two couples appeared to be in their early 30s, one couple seemed to be in their early 20s, and the last pair had an ageless quality that made it difficult to tell if they were in their 30s or pushing 50. They chatted and laughed like old friends or perhaps even family, but the lack of any resemblance between them quickly dismissed the idea of a familial connection. The men were dressed in jeans, pearl-studded Western-style shirts, boots, and Stetsons, while the women wore jeans and boots as well, but their outfits leaned toward dresses with distinct differences. Among them was a striking 20-year-old brunette, a 30-year-old woman with raven black hair, and a timeless blonde whose beauty defied classification. The ageless blonde wore a modestly short dress that was open at the neck and clung to her curves without restricting her movements. Black cowboy boots completed her look, along with a pearl necklace and matching earrings that added a touch of sophistication. The tall 30-year-old with long raven black hair sported a body-hugging mini dress adorned with a bold gold zipper down the front. Layered gold necklaces hung just above it, practically inviting the viewer to unzip the dress. Her bright blue cowboy boots emphasized her long, slender legs. The petite woman with a fuller bust made no effort to hide her assets but opted for a skirt of a more modest length. Silver conchos and a turquoise belt highlighted her tiny waist, while her rust-colored leather cowboy boots, encrusted with turquoise, drew eyes to her elegant legs. Her tangled black hair framed her oval face beautifully. However, it was the 20-year-old brunette who stood out the most. Her short dress, adorned with embroidered red roses and fastened with red clasps, accentuated her petite yet proud figure. A red sash cinched her waist, and her skater skirt flowed down her back, stopping mid-thigh. Red high-heeled cowboy boots complemented her look, while her painted red lips and poised demeanor made her utterly captivating. When the group had first entered, their appearance momentarily silenced the room and turned heads, including those of 5 large men seated at a corner table near the dance floor. These men shifted their chairs with an air of defiance to get a better view of the women, catching the attention of the 8 seated in the booth as well as 2 men observing from the shadows. The group ordered a second round of drinks, followed quickly by a third, before anyone ventured onto the dance floor. Once they did, they went together as a group. The band played a mix of country music and southern rock, and the 8 danced for over 20 minutes, switching partners after each song. The men laughed at their own clumsy attempts to keep up, but they couldn't help admiring the women's fluid grace, impeccable rhythm, and natural coordination. An older gentleman approached their group and was met with respectful greetings before his request for the classic Bob Wills song, "Stay a Little Longer," was honored. The women spun, twirled, and dipped with vibrant energy, while the men performed in sync to the lively swing tune. Few joined them on the floor, as this old-fashioned style of dancing seemed lost on the more modern, upscale crowd. The men seated at the corner table took the opportunity to get a closer look at the women. They noticed that the brunette's bikini panties matched the red clasps on her dress and her lush, red-painted lips. One of the men, a brute named Lavalier, muttered to his friends, "That little thing's mine. I'll hang those red panties on my Porsche mirror for a month. Best air freshener ever." As the swing song ended, the men returned to their booth with drinks, while the women, still energized, linked arms with their former dance partners and rejoined them. A third round of drinks awaited them at their table, graciously provided by their hosts. They ignored the arrogant grins of the 5 men as they passed by, accustomed to the attention and crude remarks their women often received. Fighting every time someone ogled them would be a full-time job, and their men knew it. These women were sexy, they knew it, and they expected others to notice. Once back at their table, the group arranged themselves so that the youngest couple sat at the end of the booth, directly facing the prying eyes of the 5 men. The older couple sat next to them, while the other 2 pairs filled the remaining space. "You always look so put together, Norma," the radiant brunette said admiringly. "Whether you're on stage with your family or dancing, you always exude the kind of grace and class the rest of us can only hope to match." "Thank you, Chrissy," Norma replied, smiling. "Coming from you, that's high praise for a country girl like me." "She's right," Melanie chimed in. Norma. Whether you're at a rodeo, a horse race, or dressed up for an awards show, you always look flawless. Norma laughed. You girls are too sweet. I may have a 15-year head start on you and Melanie, and a good 25 on Chrissy, but I'd say we're all looking pretty sharp today. Sammy, she added, wrinkling her nose, at least the women do. The men came in wearing their work clothes. Everyone laughed, and the men admitted the women were indeed far more polished, offering the excuse that they hadn't had time to change. Compliments and lively chatter filled the air as they recounted highlights from the earlier reception they had attended. The businessmen seated in the booth next to them eventually left, but their spot was quickly filled by two new couples. As they got settled, one of the women gasped, "Oh my God, that's Mark Lavalier sitting over there with his teammates." One of the men at their table added, "I've heard this place is one of his favorite hunting grounds. What would you do if he came over and asked to take you home?" A man teased his date. She giggled. "I don't know about going home with him, but if that rich, handsome man asks me to dance, I'll dance. If you do, he'll tempt you to go home with him. What then? Will you leave me?" "Darling," she said with a wink, "he won't. But if he does, remember, I love you and will still be your wife after he's had his fun. After all, it's Mark Lavalier." Before the man could respond, the woman gasped, "Oh my God, Val, he's coming this way. You might just get your chance." Everyone turned to watch as Lavalier approached, but instead of stopping at their booth, he walked straight to the radiant brunette and asked, "May I have the honor of dancing with you, beautiful lady?" A heavy silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to her as her male companion frowned and asked, "Where you from, man?" "It sure ain't Texas." The big man looked visibly irritated by the remark but responded, "I live here in Houston." "Well, you might reside in Houston, but you're no Texan. If you were a true Texan, you'd have come to me, her husband, to ask permission to dance with Chrissy instead of sauntering over like you owned the place and asking her directly." Chrissy, letting go of her husband's hand, leaned in and whispered, "It's fine. I'll dance with him once, and we can avoid any trouble. I know how you get, and I don't want us spending the night in jail or calling an ambulance." Shaking his head firmly, Lane replied, "Negative," then redirected his focus back to the intruder. "You clearly think you're someone important. Who exactly are you?" Lane asked. "I'm Mark Lavalier, quarterback for the local soccer team," he replied with a touch of arrogance. "And who are you?" "My name is Lane," he answered before shifting his attention to the men seated across from him. "By the way, are there any other professional teams in Texas besides the Cowboys? My dad once told me about a team called the Oilers that existed years ago. Said some idiot owner moved them to Tennessee, and that was the end of it." "Oh yeah," one of the men chimed in, "they've got a team here and this guy plays for it, sometimes as an edge defenseman. You may recall me mentioning him during a fantasy soccer draft." "Oh no, is that him, Charlie?" Another man laughed. "I remember now. That's the guy you picked who kept missing games because of a sore pinky toe or an ingrown toenail. You complained about him all season." The big guy bristled, his voice hardening. "Are you calling me a wuss?" he demanded. "Well," the man said, "let's think about it. How many games did you miss because of your pinky? Your thumb? And how many games did you actually play? If I'm not mistaken, you missed more games than you played, which might just qualify as the definition of wimpy." Lavalier's face flushed as he took a step toward Lane, but before he could act, Charlie slid out of a booth behind him and warned, "You'd better think carefully before you make a move. Lane's not someone to mess with, and we've got his back." Lavalier glanced at Charlie and saw a much larger man sizing him up. Unnerved, he took a step to the side and turned to his friends seated at another table. They quickly got up and came to stand behind him. "Honey," one of the women remarked casually, "weren't those blinds for our new house made by a company named Lavalier or something like that? I remember telling you they looked cheap." Hoping to regain some confidence, Lavalier shot back, "I'm a millionaire professional soccer star, you idiot. I make more money in a season than you'll make in a decade." "You might be right, Mr. Soccer Star," Lane replied coolly, "but it seems like you get paid whether you play or not. Us working folks, we show up every week, compete, and win to get paid. You, on the other hand, can sit on the sidelines in street clothes with an ingrown toenail and still collect a paycheck. My finger was broken, smartass, Lavalier retorted defensively, and I had an ingrown toenail. Bud, Lane asked, how many rodeos did you miss last year because of a broken finger? Let's see, Bud replied, pretending to think it over. Exactly 0. Riders keep working with broken arms, hands, and fingers. A cowboy who skips a rodeo for a broken finger would be laughed off the circuit. How about you, Charlie? Did you stop riding bulls when a bull broke your toe? Are you kidding? Charlie chuckled. If I don't work, my kids don't eat, and my wife doesn't shop. And you, Lane? Charlie asked. Did you quit calf roping or horseback riding when you hurt your knee? Nope, Lane said with a shrug. I slapped on a big bandage and didn't take it off until the 4th of July. Then I had surgery, healed up, and was back in time to compete in the finals in Vegas. That's just how it is, Charlie. Like today, when we put on another show at the biggest rodeo in the world. By the way, Lavalier, Lane continued, did you know a rodeo draws way more fans than a professional soccer game? It's also the most dangerous sport, with the most injuries and even fatalities. My knee may ache, but I don't sit out when fans pay good money to see me ride. I show up, do my job, and perform. That's what being a man is about. Whiners, though, find every excuse to sit on the sidelines, and they're always first in line for their paycheck. Well, honey, Chrissy interjected with a sly grin, to be fair, of the few people who bought tickets, a lot came to see the singer and his band. Not just you and Bud. There you go again, dear, Lane quipped, putting me on the spot. When the laughter subsided, Lane turned to an older gentleman. What do you think, Jorge? Who's the liar here? The so-called soccer star? Or just another lazy fraud? Jorge chuckled. In my profession, a broken pinky doesn't earn you a paid spot on the bench. Maybe if it was your thumb or index finger, but a pinky? Come on. By this point, Lavalier's frustration was evident. Ignoring the comments, he turned back to Chrissy and asked loudly, are you ready to dance with me? Beautiful? Don't worry about this little man. I can handle him and my friends can take care of the rest. I know you want to dance, so move him aside and let's get this started. Chrissy stared at him for a long moment. Who do you think you are? She asked icily. Why would I dance with some obnoxious jerk who preys on married women because he can't find one of his own? My husband is a world champion rider. It's not just his rodeo awards either. Leaning into Lane for emphasis, she said firmly, so no, you arrogant idiot. I'm not dancing with you, and I'm definitely not going home with you. Fine, Lavalier spat. Screw you. You don't know what you're missing. Go home with your little man. Without standing, Lane calmly grabbed Lavalier's pinky toe, bent it back until it cracked, and stomped on his foot, encased in its fancy leather shoe. Lavalier yelped and hopped around in pain as his friends rushed forward. Before they could escalate, 2 men in dark suits approached the table, their hands moving subtly toward their jackets. One of them raised an index finger and said sternly, you boys are threatening some very important people here. You need to collect your friend and get back to your table, or better yet, leave. Your time here is done. Get out. After taking a moment to assess the situation, Lavalier's companions supported him as they glared at Lane's table. The men and women sitting there simply laughed as the soccer players made their way toward the door. Go on, Jorge, Lane said with a smirk. Give them your best line. In a surprisingly high-pitched voice, the old man shouted, get your asses out of here. You heard me. Out.